10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX, Godspeed, Bob and Doug.
America has launched. And so rises a new era of American spaceflight, and with it the ambitions of a new generation continuing the dream.
So what started off as a disappointing Wednesday afternoon last week due to weather conditions has since become historic and full of excitement for the future. SpaceX has taken a huge step towards achieving what they always wanted to do, and that is to move us one step closer to being a spacefaring civilization. 2020 is looking like a rough year for all of us.
Downright apocalyptic images coming out of Australia right now.
There are now 6 fires burning at emergency level.
The smoke is so intense and so thick it can be seen from space.
The United Nations says locust swarms are threatening the food supply of millions. They've devastated thousands of crops as they move across parts of Africa.
The number of deaths here in the United States has just crossed 100,000.
But May 30th, 2020 will always be remembered as a historic day by the team over at SpaceX, as it was the first time that they, a private company, was able to launch a rocket with astronauts on it. And while there are countless people to thank from SpaceX and NASA, including engineers, scientists, support staff, as well as the 2 brave astronauts who are risking their life to test out the program, a thanks does go to Elon Musk. Whether you think he's a madman bent on destroying Tesla stock or the savior of our generation, it can't be denied that his larger-than-life ideas and companies have paved the way for this to be possible, and of all the companies, while Tesla is cool, SpaceX by far is my favorite, and in my opinion the most important for humanity going forward. But if you're watching this, you already know all of this, and you already know how the launch went. But let's break it down from the beginning of the project all the way to what this means for the future of SpaceX. So if you're living under a rock for the past 10 years, or you're just looking for the top 10 hits before you research further, let's jump right into it. So in order to know how important this launch is, we do need to go back to the space age glory days. After successfully beating the USSR to put the first man on the moon on July 1969, the space program was kind of in a lull after taking that giant leap for mankind. Kennedy, the original proponent for the mission to the moon, was assassinated, and the Soviet Union collapsed soon after the moon landing. What came after was a period of relative peace and collaboration. Yes, NASA did go on to send 10 more astronauts to the moon and worked with other countries to build the International Space Station. But aside from some research projects here and there, that was largely the extent of large endeavors they've performed. We never saw another big leap for mankind come from space, and that was okay, because space is getting damn expensive. Justifying taxpayer dollars to send people into space while countries are running economic deficits and wars on Earth are becoming much more prevalent, NASA slowly faded into the background, performing their research duties, but never at the same level and budget that they used to be, so much so that in 2011, the space shuttle fleet was retired, and NASA had effectively no way to get to space or the International Space Station. And if they needed to, they would have to pay the Russians $81 million per seat just to get to the International Space Station. But with the ending of one chapter brought about another, in which NASA decided to try allowing commercial space travel to take a leap, and so they positioned offers to 2 of the largest players in the US market at the time, Boeing and SpaceX, with Boeing receiving $4.8 billion and SpaceX receiving $3.1 billion. With the slashed budget as more funding was allocated to defense and security, NASA believed that getting the commercial sector involved in transporting astronauts to the International Space Station and low Earth orbit would be a good way to reduce overall costs, as market competition leads to efficiencies not seen by a government agency, and it could free up NASA to focus on some larger goals such as going to Mars. At this stage in the game, Boeing was a huge company, an absolute giant compared to SpaceX, because they were successful in manufacturing planes as well as have been around for nearly a century, whereas SpaceX wasn't even a decade old and is already making these wild claims about the future of space travel being faster and cheaper, with this guy at the head. Fast forward 9 years to May 30th, 2020, and it's SpaceX, the underdog, who's strapped in and ready to go to the International Space Station. There was some ups and a lot of downs. But it was all leading to this point, the one last final test and the last roadblock before this whole initiative could be called a success. And that brings us to the mission. Yeah, sure, it's cool that we're sending people on a rocket, but it's not even Mars, and we've already been to the space station before, so what's so cool about this? Or what's the mission here? Well, the kicker is here that this isn't even actually a mission really. It's still a test flight, the final test flight to determine if an American private company can save America from its dependency on the Russians. Let's take a look at what we know so far about what this test has accomplished. So firstly, Wednesday aside, the launch on Saturday, successful. Boosters landing on the launching pad and being reusable, successful. Docking to the International Space Station, successful. Seeing Elon Musk smile, successful. Already the mission has been a resounding success. The rest of the mission lies with the astronauts Doug Hurley and Robert Behnken, who will be spending 1 to 4 months on the space station performing routine duties, but most of their whole mission was to test out the capsule. Even though the system is fully autonomous from flying all the way to docking with the International Space Station, they did turn on manual control to test it out for emergency purposes. So with all that done, the final thing to test will be how the rocket handles upon re-entry back onto Earth, and if it can get the astronauts back home safely. And hoping it can do this, it brings us to the final part of this video. What does it all mean for the future of SpaceX, of NASA, and just the future of space travel in general? So there's 4 main things here. For one, it'll be cheaper to send people to low Earth orbit. Remember when I said NASA had to pay $81 million per seat to Russia every time they wanted to send someone to low Earth orbit? Well, SpaceX was able to do this for $55 million, primarily due to the rocket being 80% reusable, and they are actively working on bringing this price down further. Also, don't have any hopes up for Boeing making it cheaper, because they were planning on charging more than Russia per seat. But with seats being cheaper, it means that NASA has more room in their budget to send people to the International Space Station to work on other tests and research, and it also just means they get more value for their money over the long term, which they'll be able to justify to taxpayers. Secondly, SpaceX has partnered with Space Adventures, a space tourism business that has helped send private citizens to the International Space Station for tourist purposes. By showing the whole world that they can launch and safely bring back people, business is likely to explode, especially for those of you that have millions of dollars lying around. Given SpaceX's lead, if they are able to capitalize on this and have frequent trips for private citizens in the coming years before any of their competitors catch up, they can grow much larger than they currently are, and funding will likely not be a problem going forward. Thirdly, competition is likely to increase. This launch will serve as kind of a proof of concept to other companies. It can be done, and it can be done by private entities. Now, space has the potential to be a trillion-dollar industry at the minimum, so this is likely to lead to more companies trying to get in on this and fund work in this space. If you look at Blue Origin, the space company by Jeff Bezos, on its website it states that the New Shepard will soon take private citizens to space, and that's also the plan of Virgin Galactic, assuming that they can get their rockets to stop exploding. So anyway you slice it, more competition's on the way. And from what we've seen, competition is good because it pushes prices down and fosters innovation. There are a ton of other future impacts, but the last and most important one that I want to talk about is that we are now one step closer to getting people to Mars. Yes, we have just only made it to low Earth orbit, but it's a huge milestone that can be used as a stepping stone for longer, safer missions. Based on the post-launch conference, Musk was saying that he's hoping to have a rocket ready to circle the moon in the next 2 to 4 years, which means that once SpaceX gets to the moon, they would have gone as far as NASA, and then anything further than that in terms of human exploration becomes another leap for mankind. The moon is the next stop on NASA's Moon to Mars campaign, so hearing that it might be a few years away is pretty exciting. I, for one, can't wait to see that and where the future takes us. Thanks for watching everybody, hope you enjoyed the video.